Part-Time Hitter is brought to you by Friendly Forces, a 501c3 nonprofit committed to helping reserve component members seamlessly integrate their military service with rewarding civilian careers. We connect them with employers who value their unique skills and critical role in national security and advise organizations how to become more reservist-friendly. Check them out at www.friendlyforces.org. Friendly Forces is also brought to you by the Fratty Guard, a lifestyle brand for part-time hitters. Check them out at www.thefrattyguard.com and on Instagram at @thefrattyguard. Welcome to a very special episode of the Part-Time Hitter podcast. I'm your host, Eric Evans, and today I'm here with retired Colonel John Shaffner and Diana Deen of Stand for Justice. As I said, this isn't a typical episode in which I would normally talk to a current or a former reservist. Instead, I'm talking to my former boss at the Pentagon and his colleague, Diana Deen, as they try to tackle an issue that is currently truly destroying the lives of veterans as we speak, particularly those in the Guard and Reserve. And it revolves around VA home loans. So John, Diana, thank you for joining us on the Part-Time Hitter podcast. It's an honor to have you. I mentioned you're with Stand for Justice. So what is Stand for Justice and what is the problem out there that you're looking to fix?
So Eric, first off, great to see you again. Been a little bit too long. We've talked a few times, but it's nice to see you and talk about this great issue. And really it's something that you've provided some great help with. But so Stand for Justice was born out of a problem that we noticed with veterans specifically and veterans with home loans. And then you passed us several folks in the Guard and Reserve that were having issues coming out of the COVID forbearance period. They were having issues getting their loans reinstated or making payments again, or they're finding themselves kind of on the bad end of some raw deals with regard to loan servicers, VA loan tech support, those kind of things. So what Stand for Justice is established to do, and Diana will wrap up anything I forget, but we're out there to provide a free service that takes your specific issue, and believe me, we've seen that no two cases are the same. Takes your issue with if you went into COVID forbearance or had another issue with your VA home loan at some point, either currently or in the past, and have either had to refinance that loan or otherwise adjust that loan in a way that wasn't quite what you expected or were told was the way it was going to work. Like say when you went into COVID forbearance and all of a sudden they say, hey, you owe us $30,000, $40,000 and we're going to refinance your loan from 2% to 6%. And you're now going to owe $1,000 more a month. I'm sorry, but that's what you're going to do. Or we're going to foreclose, right? So you've seen that happen. It was in the news a little bit, a couple months ago. But then they got excited in the Congress, the halls of Congress, and then pushed the problem out to the right. So they've done that a couple times on us, and every time they do it, they put a new program in place, and those programs are communicated in a multitude of different ways, and none of them have, well, not none of them, but many of them don't help. But what we found with the folks that we've dealt with, to include, we'll get in a couple of stories, but either a reservist on deployment who gets a foreclosure notice, another guardsman that they could have very easily fixed their problem with an existing program, which we helped them with, but they were getting foreclosure notices and notices that they need to refinance their loan to a much higher interest rate, much higher payment. So they're putting these people's housing at risk because the programs aren't being, commonly applied, or people that are supposed to be helping you are ignorant of these programs. That's kind of where we come in and we dig into the root of your problem. We have a team of very experienced banking and legal professionals, again, for free, that can really, glean out where they went wrong, we'll say. And pretty consistently, it's the loan servicing companies or the VA in one way or another has kind of missed a step somewhere. And we can provide a very relatively quick remedy to these problems. So at Stand for Justice, great team, very powerful, very deeply experienced in the loan and mortgage space. And we're really enjoying the fact that we're really helping these veterans stay in their homes and continue in payments that are, manageable, and taking that very stressful occasion, out of their life and letting them focus back on what they should be doing. So Diana, you can add anything that I missed, but that's in a nutshell what we've been working on for the last 6-8 months.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan and Eric, both of you. The reality is that forbearance was there to help us, but forbearance seems to have caused a lot of problems too, because not every mortgage servicer with our VA-backed loans, agreed to follow the rules or even understood the rules. There were over 80 circulars coming from the VA instructing servicers on what to do and what not to do. Most of them were not well trained. Most of them didn't understand. And so when everyday people had real life problems, they were supposed to get help. Forbearance was easy. Getting out of forbearance has been super complicated. So as Jonathan says, we are here to help people navigate that and to understand that they are not alone, and that we really believe that by empowering everyday people to fight and advocate for themselves, we can stand with them and bring them the justice that they deserve.
No, I love the mission. So when John had originally reached out and told me about it, I said I was all in. But is this a new issue? Had this been happening for years, or has this just started happening where veterans are, to translate this a bit, getting screwed over when they're unable to make a payment and do certain things, which I thought the VA loan program was basically supposed to protect from happening. So is this a new phenomenon, or has it been around for a while?
So what I would say is, having forbearance of this nature is new, and it's very COVID centric. Over 8 million people took forbearance. But in a recent study by what we call the Office of Inspector General for the U.S. government, they discovered that more than 85% of the people who took out, just everyday people who took forbearance, were never offered the programs that they qualified for. When we look at that within the veteran and the reservist population, that actual increase percent goes up significantly. In other words, it's not a new problem to fall behind in your payments. It's not a new problem to have a mortgage company threaten foreclosure. But what's new is that there were new rules and new programs set up by the government that our servicers have not complied with, and the VA has not enforced it. That is new.
So are the lenders willful in some of what they're doing? I mean, who's dropping the ball here? Is it the lenders, or is it the VA, or is it both of them?
Well, I'll start and then I'll hand it over to the Colonel. I would tell you that it is hard to know whether it's intentional or not. What's important is that there are different departments in every mortgage company, and they don't talk to each other. And also, oftentimes loans are sold. So you might have forbearance with your current company that you pay your mortgage to, and then all of a sudden you have to pay someone else, and they said, oh no, we don't think you're in forbearance. We've seen a lot of that. When loans get transferred, that happens as well. So, it can be, and part of our theory is that in certain cases, definitely we have seen bad behavior, illegal activity, lack of compliance with the laws and regulations by these both banks and non-financial mortgage servicing companies, for sure. However, what's really important is those mistakes are governed by laws that give every single borrower a lot of rights. And that's one of our key messages today, is that if you're listening to this and you've had frustration and challenge with your mortgage servicing company, you have rights, and we're here to help you learn more about that. Jonathan?
Yeah, so it's hard to really pin it down, right? Because there's so many people that exist across these companies, both internally and between the companies, and then up to the VA, of course, who has a VA loan tech program, who is there to provide you assistance. And as Diana said, there are 80 circulars. So each of these circulars is in military terms like a new change to the regulation, right? So they put a new nuance or a new method or a new program to help you out there, and then that has to get from the top at VA, through the VA, into the servicer, all of the servicers, and then down to that person who's dealing with you and your loan, who may or may not have an abundance of experience with the VA loan circulars or the VA programs as it is. Because what we've noticed is there isn't a, kind of breaking it down, there isn't an if-then sheet or a call sheet or a process that they go through that is consistently updated with these new programs and ideas that go through. So it's hard to glean the malicious act from the individual failure to the process failure. But what we found is there's probably a little bit of all of it. But again, going back to what we do is we can decode it and help those people with the mortgages to push the right buttons and get the help that they need. We've seen a lot of positive response from servicers when they realize that the person who's in trouble knows what they're talking about and presents them with the solutions. That too, as easy as, oh, you just have to apply for this program, which they may not have known of, or they likely didn't know of. You apply for the program and then the problem is remedied in weeks, if not a few months. So it's a lot of lack of knowledge sharing. And again, it's hard to say how much of it is malicious or intentional, but what we do know is that it is quite challenging to level the bubbles across all the people involved in a home mortgage. I mean, if you ever bought a home and how many sheets of paper you fill out to buy, especially the mortgage part, there's so much legalese and stuff in there that, you just usually get the brief from your mortgage originator and then you're like, yeah, I think that makes sense. And what we're there to do is to make sure that they stick to that.
I mean, yeah, it's intimidating. No one really knows what it's saying. When you get a letter from your bank or your mortgage lender saying you owe this, you have to do this. It's like, especially if you're like a 21-year-old kid, it's it's intimidating and it's complicated. And I can see how people feel like they don't know what to do and they don't have any way out. But as you said, you've been able to work with a number of service members already. So can you kind of walk me through what is an example of something you've seen in real life where you've been able to offer assistance with issues that service members have had around this?
Yeah, I'll start. We've had two reservist families who had taken out loans and then were impacted in different ways by COVID. And one person had an accident and he had already been deemed 100% disabled. And then he got COVID and his partner was pregnant with their first child, had their baby, and neither one of them could find work. And so ultimately what we were able to do is help them tie into what was called the Homeowners Assistance Fund, actually both families. And I'll talk about the other family as well. But in the Homeowners Assistance Fund, they were funds sent out by the United States after COVID or really during COVID to help families precisely in forbearance, coming out of forbearance, to take care of all of those arrearages through grants to help them. But more than half the states have already run out of money. So it happened to be in their state, which was Pennsylvania, they had money. But we happened to know that the fund at that state level had been closed down and was soon to open again. And so what we did was we helped each of these families write letters, tell their stories, and actually present their application to the Homeowners Assistance Fund. And over a number of months, provide additional information and actually got all of their past due payments paid for through grants. And both of their homes are now, their loans are reinstated and their families are safe in their homes. But it's hard because not every state has that kind of money available. There are other monies available. So we're also looking at lobbying some of the congressmen and senators to make those monies available, especially to veterans and especially to active service members. But that would be one example. Jonathan, you want to add anything?
Yeah, so we say active servicemen, people that are currently serving in the Guard and Reserve as well, because as you talk about all the time here, Eric, is the plight of the guardsmen and reservists is different than the plight of the active duty folks. There's a lot of difference and nuance and employment and payment and other things, whereas you still have access to some services or things like the VA loan. But we found that as we dig into these case files, as we've been calling them, we can either find the easy button where it's the housing assistance fund where it exists, or other errors or omissions that were made during the execution of that loan forbearance program. So forbearance when, you had a financial difficulty, couldn't pay your loan. It was very easy to get into, as Diana said. But as you come out, we make sure that everything is covered and that, you can follow the path to reinstatement like a normal loan payment without, having these, collection calls and calls to, your danger of foreclosure. Those are things that put significant emotional, mental burdens on families and guards and reservists. And as I think we talked about, a little bit previously, one of these guys was deployed when he got his foreclosure notice, and he was very much caught off guard by that. I don't know if Dan, if we can talk a little bit about that path, because that one I think will hit a lot of Eric's population the hardest, because you're supposed to have all kinds of protections when you're deployed, right? Soldier status relief, all the things, you should be protected against that. But this guy still received literally a note posted on his door saying his home was going to be foreclosed, and it was just kind of caught him out of the blue. Thought, hey, I'm deployed, I'm in this program. Thought it was good. So I think Diana, that would be a good one kind of hit on, because we've been fighting that one really hard.
Yeah, we have. So this is a case in the state of New York, where there are no more homeowners assistance funds, but the law, the Service Members Civil Relief Act, which we all call the SCRA, when it comes to mortgage, you're protected without signing up. If you're on active service and for a full 12 months after you return, the banks are by law really prohibited from acting out in any kind of collection capacity. So in this particular case, a bank had disregarded that law and had continued on foreclosure procedures. And it actually took the family of this service member calling their senator to take action on that case. Once they did that, we were able to get connected to this person, and he has returned to the U.S. But we have been working really hard by following the very laws that banks are supposed to follow to present information and to notify banks and mortgage servicers of the errors that were made in this case. And in his case in particular, there are multiple violations of law, which he would not know. But we know, because that's our expertise and why we've built our team in the particular way we have. And so there are direct actions that can be taken to protect him legally and otherwise, to make sure that over the long run, he's able to keep his home, and we can find ways to fill the gap, either through putting all those payments at the end of the life of his loan through what they call deferral, or there had been a program that the VA had backed to make it a balloon payment, so that if you sold your home, it would get paid off, all of those past due payments. But in this particular case, we're still fighting the fight. And we're working really hard to make sure that the banks don't actually continue to make those mistakes. And he's not the only case in this, but the really egregious act here was that they served foreclosure notice payments on the door of his house while he was deployed.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely getting into SCRA territory, which is a related but like totally different thing. But I would think if I was deployed and I got a foreclosure notice, that I would hope that I'd be able to call up my bank and say, hey, I'm deployed, never heard of SCRA, you can't do this. Were these banks just deaf to these kinds of concerns, or were they not being communicated by the service number? Like, it's hard for me to imagine a bank.
Yeah, no, in this scenario, actually, there was a lot of communication from the service member. However, the banks didn't comply until it took a lot of political movement to make that happen, which is the point. And I want to be clear, it's not just banks, it's also there are mortgage servicing companies that are not banks. The reason that's important is that you need to understand that there are different laws that govern banks, because they take deposits, versus just practicing the process of servicing your loan. So we're working with all that complexity and trying to simplify it for people. So yes, he called, and yes, it didn't matter.
A lot of the time, don't those, a lot of mortgages get ultimately sold to, kind of the 3 or 4 or 5 major banks, even if was initiated with some smaller servicer?
So there's two challenges. There are what we would call the actual note that you signed when you bought your home is the instrument that is the investment, right? So the bank invests in your mortgage and then you pay your mortgage. And so in our banking system in the United States, they oftentimes separate those two. So you might have one party own your mortgage and a different party actually service your mortgage. And that's where we see a lot of problems. Just to give you a feel, there are 485 non-bank mortgage service companies in the United States. And there are a number of them who claim to be working specifically with veterans or with service members or with military. And unfortunately, we've seen some of the worst behaviors. And we do research on these various companies through what's called the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, because we also write complaints for our customers or our clients, our partners in this difficult situation. And we know, and we can do research on how many others are complaining. And we found a number of our particular cases have other people, other active service members or other veterans talking about the exact same problems. And so it's a common problem.
So are we seeing some of the same names pop up over and over again as far as the worst offenders thing from servicers and banks?
For sure.
Are you able to say
we
who
are.
those are?
And the CFPB has put out a new regulation in the last 60 days that each of those non-bank financial institutions must actually register a single human being with the CFPB so that they can be held accountable for those wrongs. For example, when we work with a client to file a complaint, that complaint goes back to that institution and they're required to give an answer to the CFPB. But they're still not complying. And for that reason, the laws and regulations are getting stiffer for these organizations. And obviously, there's a proliferation of these types of organizations, which is really our problem. We don't have enough U.S. government regulators to regulate them. And so we see more and more bad behaviors. And we definitely see certain organizations who are very strong repeat offenders. But the good news is the CFPB sees it too, and they're trying to address it directly.
So is some of this actionable on the part of the service member from a civil or I guess not criminal, maybe criminal, but civil litigation, financial recovery aspect? Is that at play here?
Yes, it is. We have an important family for us down in Florida, and we are in the process of connecting them with a lawyer that we trust because their case has got numerous actionable violations. Some of it started when they were with one company, had a fantastic relationship. This company, for example, has only 5 complaints at the CFPB, but their loan was sold, the mortgage servicing rights was sold to a different company. And when that happened, and this happens to be a bank, it's like all the information didn't transfer. And they were just coming out of forbearance before the loan got sold. They were going to make 3 consistent payments. And then when it got sold, they wouldn't accept their payments. And so we have pretty strong evidence that not all the data transferred correctly. And they've been really harassed quite a bit by the new bank and threatened. And it's caused major health problems, major stress for this family. And we believe, actually a number of us believe, that their case is actionable and that the potential fines, penalties, and really awards that will be due to them will be in the millions because it is very egregious. And this is a case where we're really spending a lot of time. And, our job is to help empower them. They've written letters. One of the laws is called RESPA, and you're allowed to write a notice of an error. We've helped them write that letter. They got a response, which basically said you weren't in forbearance, of which they provided a letter saying that you were in forbearance. I mean, the information they sent was conflicted. And then on top of that, we wrote a different letter that by law, they're supposed to acknowledge within 5 days and respond within 30, and they never did any of that. And so those are the kinds of behaviors that we see. And we also have read that that bank has now sold its entire mortgage portfolio again to somebody else. So we see this problem when loans get sold, bigger mistakes are made, and it is really a challenge. And so it takes a lot of strength. If you're an individual, most of us, when we start having problems with our finances or problems with paying our mortgage, we tend to shrink back. But actually what we're here to do is help people stand up and really fight the system. It's not about the individual. It's really about the system. It's not set up to help people win. They're supposed to be helping you win. But there are many programs that should help people turn this around, ways to help mitigate the losses. And that's what we're working on with these folks.
Well, it's a particular pet peeve of mine, because it's probably some of these same organizations that are doing these terrible things to veterans that are publicly saying how much they love the military and how much they support veterans. So for me, that drives me like wild. I hate to see that. So I'm wondering, do you have sort of a naughty list or a name and shame list that we should be putting out there to the community? Like, would that be an effective strategy?
So I'll jump in on that one for you, Diana, because I know it makes you uncomfortable. Me too, right? Well, here's the thing, Eric. It's tough, and I'll push you some media that's been on this topic, so you can attach it to the show notes. Because I mean, we're not gonna. I don't want to say out of our mouths, but there's plenty of opportunity to take a look at a link and see who's getting hit with it. But here's the really crazy part of it is it doesn't. I mean, it matters, right? But it doesn't matter if we tell you who these people are, because it'll be bad on their name. But what they're going to do is they're going to change their name. Because if you've noticed, if you have a mortgage, your mortgage servicer may change. And that may be the same company under a different name, or maybe just pass, as Diana said, a whole portfolio bunched up and shipped over to somebody else, and just they clear the books that way. But there's different things where they're still responsible and culpable for those actions that they took. So we're working on that, but it's not something you can affect, right? You can't say, hey, I've got my loan, but I don't want it going to this company. I don't want you to sell it, because you don't have. That's one of the rights you kind of have as a homeowner, is you can't tell them where to sell your loan to. But what, again, back to what we do is we're helping people get past that and find the solutions. But you're going to see a lot more, much as you saw. In the previous financial crisis, there's going to be a shakeup of the banks coming. There already has been, billions of dollars in penalties paid by certain banks. And as Diana said, and we talked about, there are some banks that are there to serve service members, some specifically for service members, and that they're some of the biggest culprits in this thing. And a couple of those that you could probably think of off the top of your head have gone from being very high as far as the number of loan originations for VA loans to almost non-existent in the space because of this problem that they realize they have. They just kind of get out of the business because they don't have the way to fix it. Now, looking at this and really the long-term goal of this Stand for Justice group is we want to make it so that these loans, when you originate your home purchase, that you are followed and tracked to ensure compliance in almost an automated way from the first time you buy it, through the different sales of your loan, through loan satisfaction when you sell your home or pay it off or whatever, so that it's much easier to track and ensure that all the regulations and VA circulars and things that should have applied to your loan are applied. So that's really the stretch goal for us. I mean, first, help people that are in trouble, but capture all that damage and harm that's done to people consistently, and really build a system that is more fair to the lender once they've gotten a loan, versus dealing with kind of the whack-a-mole that we do now and chasing down all these different companies, because you're following one track and you're getting some ground, and then all of a sudden that mortgage is sold, because there's nothing stopping them from selling it, no matter what kind of condition the mortgage is in, from selling to somebody else. And then you automatically have to open a relationship with a new company and try to read them in on where you've been and where you are, much like this Florida case we're talking about. They had great rapport and action and everything was going wonderfully, and then it was sold, and then it fell off the rails. Now we've got it kind of back on the rails, and it's one of those things where it really exemplifies the complications.
Well, this goes back to kind of, my original question is, how does fixing this or helping service members, why does that have to fall to you guys and stand for justice? Why isn't there another body, the VA or somebody, actively, providing oversight and enforcing the laws and regulations around this?
So we've actually worked with a former VA secretary, and we've talked to him about moving forward what's possible, and we've got a really deep look into the VA and some of the issues and problems that they have. Whereas, this tool, right, that is a benefit of all service, is one of the things that they kind of hang their head on as something that's really good. So they are interested and they want to make this better. But as you've probably dealt with the VA and other things, a very big organization that you've got to get down a lot of levels to really make that change happen. So we have an approach, I think, that will make a difference in the coming years. But really, what we're doing now is to make sure that we can identify what's going wrong, because that's actually solving any problem, right? You got to figure out what the problem is, and we tend to find a new layer to it with every case. But outlining that so that we can provide them a solution that makes sense and doesn't let people fall through the cracks, kind of like they have, with what we've seen.
So it sounds like you have been engaged with members of Congress, former VA secretary. So you have some advocates, some allies, at the top that it sounds like you're working with to try and, shed more light on this. Are you working with any, other media, any other outlets to try and get this story out there and make it bigger?
So we've well, go ahead, Diana. I'll let you take that one.
Well, NPR brought light to the situation last November on Veterans Day, and as a result, you saw senators take action with the VA, and then we got movement. And prior to that, there was an expectation for 40,000 foreclosures within the VA community. After that, they put in place a moratorium, and this is one of our key messages today. That moratorium was supposed to end on May 31st, and because they still haven't solved the problem with the VA programs, now they're trying something new. And oversight from Congress over the VA is not very happy about their new program. It's not been proven to work yet. We're supposed to have every mortgage company ready to work with this new program called VASP by October 1st. But because of all of that, they've also extended the moratorium. So what that means is that if you have not made your payments on your house for a very long time, or if you're in forbearance, or if you're trying to fix the problem but it's not yet been resolved, the servicers are encouraged urgently, cannot be forced, but they're encouraged very strongly to not foreclose and not let that impact your credit score until January 1, 2025. So we have about 4 months, a little less, to keep fighting this fight and bring forward the kinds of changes we really need to see that will make a difference. That's what I was going to share.
So how can the rest of the veteran community get involved or help the initiative?
Jonathan, you want to take that?
Yeah. So I mean, honestly, all the cases that we have now are through the veteran community. Many of them are through Eric and Eric's contacts. So thanks again, Eric, for providing those help those individuals. And we were talking beforehand that of the people that Eric has provided, I believe we're near 100%. We've moved everybody's case in a positive direction. We've rectified a good number of them. A couple others are a little more challenging that are moving. Everything is moving in a positive direction. Everybody that engages with us. So if you currently are having an issue with COVID-related forbearance or with your VA loan in general, reach out to us at help at standforjustice.com. That's Eric will have. I'm sure I'll have the link in the notes there. Hit our webpage at the www.standforjustice. That's stand-for-justice. .com, and we can provide a little bit of site oversight there. And then there is a contact us button on that page. But if you hear of it, right, if you hear of anybody that may complain or whatever, just introduce them to us. And we've got, plenty of clients that are happy, with what we provided, especially because number one, it works. And number two, it doesn't cost you anything is the best thing out there. And as we fix this, I'd imagine we could probably talk sometime in the near future, Eric, about, hey, this is where we think this should go next. We've talked to, one of the chairs of the VA committee in the Senate level. We have regular contact with those in the House level. This is on both sides of the aisle. Everybody is motivated to make this happen. And then again, we have some, contact into the VA itself, but we're really in the problemization phase now. I made up a word. You can put that on your website. But really trying to define the problem. Like, how big is it? Like Dana said, there were 40,000 VA loans were going into foreclosure a couple of months ago. Who knows where that is now? It's hard to really pry those real numbers loose. But there is movement, and they keep throwing something that will help push this issue to the right, because it is something that nobody wants to stick to them, right? Nobody wants to say, hey, I was responsible for 50,000 veterans losing their homes. Veterans, active service members, Guard reservists, they keep just pushing it to the right, but it's not making the problem better. What we're actually doing with the people we engage with is making their problem better, making it go away entirely, just putting them back on good, solid footing. And I really think that's the thing is, it's you, and if you've had it and you fixed your problem yourself, there still may be some strings attached, right? So if you have come out of forbearance, had an issue with your VA loan, hit us up. We would love to have a discussion and kind of see where your problem is and where your problem lies. And if, it's all hunky dory and good to go, we'll let you know. And if there's something else that's out there for you, we'll definitely point you in that direction too. Because I have worked with this lady, my personal story, her husband passed away during COVID. It wasn't from COVID, during COVID. He's a veteran. And she got the notice due, $30,000. Luckily for her, she could scrape that money together and pay that off, but she shouldn't have had to, right? And that's the thing where, there's a lot of people that did this and like, oh my God, I have to just save my home because my loan servicer says I do, but they shouldn't have, right? I mean, it's good that they're safe in their home, but it would be good to go back and see what happened and see if there is, something there where we could either recover some, if not all of that money, help them, be on a more solid path forward. Or even if they had a chance where they refinanced, they took that. So they went from a 2.5% mortgage to a 6 or 7% mortgage. We may be able to find an avenue to make that situation better for you. So that's kind of our call to action to people with problems. And then to the greater community, as we build this problem out, and then we're going to present, our findings to CFPB, to different organizations in the VA and the banking industry, so that hopefully we can keep this from happening again, both on a large scale as it did with COVID, and then on an individual scale as it does, literally every day as mortgages are passed and things are done that aren't quite up to snuff as far as the regulations go. That we want to have a system in place that looks out for the homeowner, in a way that is constructive, good for business, good all around, one of those things. And we think it can be done without a lot of pain on anybody's part.
Yeah, I've personally seen the good and the help you've been able to offer some of the people that I've passed forward to you. So I think the big takeaway is, because it's kind of embarrassing. Nobody really wants to publicize that they're having issues paying their mortgage, but there is a group, Stand for Justice, that is here to help. They're experts. They can connect you to experts. It's not going to cost you anything, and they'll help you figure this out. But you have to reach out to them, and you can reach them at their website, which again we'll have in the notes, but it's www.stand-for-justice.com, or you can send them an email at help@stand-for-justice.com. Thank you so much for what you're doing. Diana, did you have any final words before I take us out here?
I think the main thing is to know that if you're going through a hard time, you're not alone, and you have rights, and our goal is to help you really execute those rights, and we're here to really help. Thank you. Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Diana. So we know you guys are out there. If it's not you, if you know people who are having these issues, connect them with Stand for Justice. They're doing great things. They're going to be able to help. So John and Diana, thank you so much for being here. And we'll have to have you back on after some of this stuff gets packaged up and action is taken at higher levels, and we'll see where we're at. But thank you so much for joining me tonight.